Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Venom: The Last Dance in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is called Venom: The Last Dance. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you. I'm also going to give you all the information on which OT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, starcast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. Venom: The Last Dance is a 2024 American superhero film based on the Marvel Comics character Venom. It is the sequel to Venom 2018 and Venom: Let There Be Carnage 2021, and the fifth film in Sony's Spider-Man universe, SSU. The film was written and directed by Kelly Marcel. It stars Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock and Venom, alongside Chiwetel Ejiofor, Juno Temple, Rhys Ifans, Stephen Graham, Peggy Lou, and Alana Ubach. In the film, Eddie and Venom are on the run from both of their worlds. Hardy revealed in August 2018 that he was signed on to appear in a third Venom film, and Sony Pictures began development by December 2021 after the second film was released. Marcel and Hardy were writing the script by June 2022, and Marcel was set to make her directorial debut with the film that October. New cast members, including Ejiofor and Temple, joined in mid-2023, and filming began at the end of June 2023 in Spain. Production was halted the next month due to the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike and resumed that November after the strike ended. The film was completed by the end of February 2024, and its title was revealed a month later. Venom: The Last Dance premiered at the Regal Times Square Theater in New York City on October 21, 2024, and was released in the United States on October 25th. The film received mixed reviews from critics, with criticism aimed at its convoluted story, while Hardy's performance, the action sequences, and visual effects were praised. Despite being the lowest-grossing film in the trilogy, it was still a box office success, grossing $78 million worldwide. Plot: after being transported to Earth 616 by Doctor Strange's spell, Eddie Brock and the Venom symbiote are drunk in a bar in Mexico. As the bartender fills them in about Thanos and the Infinity Stones, they are forced back to their home universe on Earth 688 to the same bar. Still on the run after their recent battle with Carnage, the apparent murder of Patrick Mulligan makes international headlines, with Eddie being named the prime suspect, forcing him to set out to New York City in an attempt to clear his name, not before unwittingly leaving a bit of venom at the bar. A creature known as a xenophage has begun secretly tracking Eddie and Venom. The recent events catch the attention of Rex Strickland, a soldier who oversees Imperium, a government operation at the site of the soon-to-be decommissioned Area 51, for the capture and study of other symbiotes that have fallen to Earth. Mulligan, revealed to have survived his encounter with Carnage, is captured after being left for dead by another symbiote who eluded Strickland's soldiers. He is bonded with one of many contained symbiotes and questioned by Imperium researchers Dr. Teddy Payne and Sadie Christmas to learn about the symbiote's purpose on Earth before Strickland is ordered to bring Venom down. While attaching themselves to the side of an airplane bound for New York City, Eddie and Venom are attacked by the xenophage tracking them and are forced to drop into the Nevada desert. Venom explains to Eddie that xenophages were unleashed into the universe by symbiote creator Null to retrieve a codex forged when a symbiote resurrects its host, which Null hopes can free him from the prison the symbiotes trapped him in long ago. Having previously revived Eddie, Venom and Eddie are now carrying a codex which the xenophage has tracked to Earth. After being ambushed by Strickland and his team while barely escaping from them and the xenophage, Eddie meets Martin Moon and his family of traveling hippies and alien enthusiasts who offer him a free ride to Las Vegas on their way to Area 51. Meanwhile, Mulligan's new symbiote informs Strickland of Null's intentions for the Codex, which can only be destroyed if either Eddie or Venom dies. Arriving in Las Vegas, Eddie and Venom run into Mrs. Chen at a casino, and Venom shares a dance with her before being ambushed by the xenophage again. Strickland's team arrives, separates Venom from Eddie, and takes them to Area 51, where Eddie reunites with Mulligan. Sadie frees Venom, who rebonds with Eddie after Strickland shoots him. This attracts the xenophage to the base, and Mulligan is killed in battle. Venom has the other confined symbiotes released, which bond with Sadie and other hosts to fight off the xenophage, who has signaled to Null that the Codex has been found. Null sends more xenophages through portals to Earth, overwhelming the symbiotes. Realizing he must sacrifice himself to destroy the Codex and save the universe, Venom merges with the xenophages, leads them into acid tanks, and bids Eddie farewell before ejecting him as a mortally wounded Strickland sets off his grenades to destroy them. Teddy bonds with a symbiote to save Sadie from the explosion, while Eddie falls unconscious as the base burns. Eddie later wakes up in a hospital, where a military official informs him that his actions with Venom at Area 51 have earned him an expungement, under the condition of keeping the events that transpired a secret. Arriving in New York City, Eddie gazes at the Statue of Liberty while remembering Venom. In a mid-credits scene, Null declares that the universe is no longer safe from him now that Venom has fallen. In a post-credits scene, the bartender who was taken into custody by Strickland shortly after Eddie left for New York escapes the burned remains of Area 51. Nearby, a black cockroach crawls out of the rubble next to a broken vial that previously contained a sample of the Venom symbiote. Music. Main article: Venom, The Last Dance soundtrack. By August 2024, Dan Deacon composed the score for the film. Release. Theatrical. Venom, The Last Dance held its world premiere at the Regal Times Square Theater in New York City on October 21, 2024, and was theatrically released by Sony Pictures Releasing in the United States on October 25th in IMAX and other premium large formats, PLFs. The film was originally expected to be released in October 2024 before it was given a release date of July 12, 2024, when Sony adjusted their release schedule due to the SAG-AFTRA strike. After the strike ended, the film's release was delayed to November 8, 2024, before it was moved forward and returned to the October 2024 timeframe. Reception. Box office. Venom: The Last Dance grossed $139.8 million in the United States and Canada and $339.2 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $478.9 million. In the United States and Canada, Venom: The Last Dance was released alongside Conclave and was projected to gross around $65 million from 4,125 theaters in its opening weekend. The film made $22 million on its first day, including $8.5 million from Thursday night previews. It went on to debut to $51 million, finishing in first but marking the lowest opening of the series. Deadline Hollywood attributed the underperformance to the ongoing Yankees-Dodgers World Series and superhero genre fatigue. Nevertheless, the film's international box office gross would help offset its weaker performance at the North American box office. The film then made $26.1 million in its second weekend, dropping 49% from its first weekend, and $16.2 million in its third weekend, dropping another 37%, retaining the top spot for 3 consecutive weeks. The Last Dance was finally dethroned in its fourth weekend, making $7.3 million and finishing second behind newcomer Red One. I doubt I'm going to incite much uproar when I say I'm not exactly a huge fan of the Venom films. Not only did the film's success pave the way for even more ill-conceived films like Morbius and Madam Web, but the mere idea of making a story about Venom without establishing Spider-Man first is a tough pill to swallow. I try to not let my comic book fan side of my brain play too much with the film critic side, but the entire purpose of this character is to be the direct antithesis of Peter Parker. That's the whole reason he's called Venom, because spiders have venom. 2018's Venom is a huge waste of potential, not doing nearly enough to make the audience care about Eddie Brock, Tom Hardy, or his symbiote companion. Venom Let There Be Carnage is a slight improvement, though not necessarily because it was better. It was just so silly to the point where it was entertaining, and that same argument can be applied to the final film in the trilogy, Venom: The Last Dance. Despite getting off to a strong start and giving us one of the best portrayals of Eddie Brock and Venom yet, the film is still bogged down by a litany of other issues that distract from the positive aspects. Venom: The Last Dance takes place directly after the end credits scene of Spider-Man: No Way Home, which the film decides to entirely reshoot for some reason. Now, back in their own universe, Eddie and Venom are still on the run from the law, only to then become the targets of a ruthless secret Black Ops organization. Not only that, Null, the shadowy and powerful creator of the symbiote race, has also sent a small legion of xenophages after Venom to fulfill his deadly plan. I may have my issues with all three Venom films, but one thing that I won't dispute is Tom Hardy's dedicated performance as both Eddie Brock and Venom. It's abundantly clear that Hardy has a lot of love for Venom as a character, and he's poured that love into the film as co-writer. Venom: The Last Dance further doubles down on making Eddie and Venom more comedic anti-heroes, but this time it works much more in its favor. Their banter is better than ever, and The Last Dance is easily the most effectively funny film in the trilogy. There are even some emotional beats between Eddie and Venom that overall work amidst the absurd scenarios they get up to. Character-wise, Venom has never been better, and that goes double for the action sequences they get swept up in. The Last Dance has, by far, the best action sequences in the trilogy, starting with a standout fight with some low-life criminals that make excellent use of both Eddie and Venom's skill sets. Other notable sequences include a thrilling chase scene that sees Venom take control of multiple animals and a final battle full of very creative imagery. As far as visual flair and entertainment value go, Venom: The Last Dance stands much taller than its predecessors. With the best portrayal of Venom yet and a surprisingly fantastic first fight, it would appear that Venom: The Last Dance is really onto something. And then the military shows up. In addition to Null, Eddie and Venom are also being pursued by a secretive military organization led by symbiote wrangler Rex Strickland, Chiwetel Ejiofor, and scientists Dr. Payne, Juno Temple, and Dr. Sadie, Clark Bacco. The film makes an admirable attempt to give these brand new characters some dimension, but their story falls completely flat compared to the carefree Venom shenanigans. Not only are the three performances, from three more than reputable performers, on display here rather underwhelming, but their stories and character arcs could not be less interesting. One of the characters' quirky personality trait is just liking Christmas. This boring subplot could be forgiven if it was a tiny aspect of the movie, but this bland detour is given almost as much screen time as Eddie and Venom. Though perhaps one who fares even worse is the film's technical villain, Knull, who really should have been more like the talented actor who plays him and been kept a secret. Instead, Venom: The Last Dance is yet another superhero film that just couldn't keep its secrets under lock and key, with Knull being featured prominently in the marketing, only to be a clear bid to boost ticket sales. I can't even really tell you if I liked Knull's portrayal in Venom: The Last Dance because the film doesn't give him enough of a chance to make an impression. Could he be a potential compelling big bad and Sony's own equivalent to Thanos, Josh Brolin? Perhaps, but his introduction in the third and final Venom film is just that, an introduction, and not a particularly engaging one at that. Instead, the true villains of Venom: The Last Dance are the xenophages, who are nothing more than powerful monsters devoid of any personality. Really, the only interesting thing about them is the way they kill their victims, which is surprisingly brutal for a PG-13 film. They simply serve to go after the many characters, such as Martin, Rhys Ifans, and his family of alien chasers, who are harmlessly entertaining. Another issue with the xenophages in Venom: The Last Dance, is how inconsistent they are. One minute they are inches away from slaughtering Eddie and Venom, the next they forget about them entirely. That's despite them still being able to kind of see, as they rip other non-venomized people to shreds in an instant. It's one of many examples of the film contradicting its own logic and ideas introduced in the prior films. all of which make for a messy continuity that rivals even that of the X-Men films. In a weird roundabout way, Venom: The Last Dance, being the most inconsistent of the Venom trilogy, is the most consistent thing for the Venom franchise. This is a saga that is filled with pros and cons and ups and downs, all to bring a fan-favorite comic book character to the big screen. A character that, over their long comic book history, has hopped back and forth between good and evil, goofy and sinister, and so on. Is Venom: The Last Dance the best film in the trilogy? I would say so, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't have quite a bit of fun while watching it. However, at the end of the day, the Venom film franchise is like that kid on the Little League baseball team who gets the Most Improved trophy. You see and appreciate how they put the work in to try and be better, but deep down, you know they probably won't be playing long enough to be remembered in the major leagues. Review: Venom: The Last Dance. The recent, long-awaited cratering of the superhero movie, with a notable Deadpool-sized exception, has led to a mad scramble, release dates pushed, marketing strategies tweaked, Robert Downey Jr. bribed, and a concerned question mark over what the future might hold for Hollywood's most commercially lucrative contemporary genre. The Venom franchise, which launched in 2018 to surprise success, had already felt like a throwback to an earlier time. A glossy and light-hearted burst of mid-deuce nostalgia, but now, with its third and final chapter releasing at such a fraught time, it also feels like a reminder of a more recent time when these films used to mean more to audiences. Whether or not something like Venom: The Last Dance will jolt enough of a response remains to be seen. The second film saw a $350 million drop at the global box office, and the third is tracking for a franchise low opening, but it's at least a smartly planned conclusion to an inoffensively silly and low-stakes series. Tom Hardy and his quippy alien symbiote leaping off a sinking ship with a spring in their step. It's not as catastrophic as Madam Web or as redundant as the Marvels or as annoying as Deadpool and Wolverine. It's just about passable in a throwaway kind of way, blessed by a surprisingly brief runtime that doesn't allow it to grate or exhaust. If only it amused and excited us a little bit more. The novelty of Hardy sparring with a dance-loving, head-eating, chocolate-guzzling alien that lives within him wore off in the middling second outing, where the first film's co-writer, Kelly Marcel, took sole credit. She returns here, also debuting as director, and brings the same struggles with her, failing to find the funny in the absurdist conceit, her dialogue quite staggeringly refusing to make us laugh even once. The franchise's lack of portentousness has always been one of its major selling points, yet it's not translated into enough genuine humor, something that becomes far more glaring this time around. Hardy intensely commits, as ever, returning as the journalist Eddie Brock, who we left last time as he was zapped into the multiverse, one where Tom Holland's Spider-Man had just been outed. But his time there is short, returning to his world after just one scene and a jab at how tiresome the multiverse is. It's hard to tell if this was always the intention or a rethought result of a shrinking genre. A clunky and convoluted cold open tease us into the threat of an impending war as Eddie and Venom are on the run, not just from the authorities, but also another alien, tracking them to obtain a magic cortex that would help free a new big bad. Their journey intersects with an alien-seeking family led by Rhys Ifans, the military led by Chiwetel Ejiofor, and some scientists led by Juno Temple, as well as a figure from his past, Stephen Graham. Arguably the strangest film about a film so thirsty to be defined as strange is the amount of British actors playing American. It's quick and brash and seemingly aware of how goofy so much of it is, but it's also awkwardly overstuffed. There are jokes without punchlines, a tertiary character's obsession with Christmas goes nowhere, unnecessary backstories, Temple's scientist gets a dead brother we never needed to know about, and a villain we never really get to see in full. He will allegedly be part of Sony's upcoming, much-delayed Kraven the Hunter. While it's a mercy to watch a superhero film of such brevity at a time when even evil clown horrors are running over 2 hours, it also has the stop-and-start choppiness of something that has caused endless headaches in the cutting room. Marcel is a director of ho-hum competence, and like many within this world, gets lost in a frantic, hard-to-follow finale of gloop and guns. An abrupt Maroon 5 soundtrack joke of an ending shows it all to be one big lark, a relief in a way that even the alleged conclusion of the series wouldn't aim for out-of-reach emotion, but also a reminder of its utter disposability. You might remember where this franchise started, but you'll be hard-pressed to remember how it ends. His hiding places are cluttered, dimly lit, and filled with objects that speak to a life. Half-eaten meals, scattered notes, memories never organized. In contrast, the Imperium labs and military facilities are designed with brutalist minimalism, bathed in sterile whites and harsh fluorescence. The xenophage sequences invert this design completely. Organic caverns of slime and fang, landscapes that feel alive in their hunger. The design department essentially creates three worlds: human, institutional, and alien. Each is distinct, and the transitions between them amplify Eddie's instability, editing and narrative rhythm. The editing ensures the film maintains momentum without losing clarity. Action sequences cut quickly, but unlike many contemporary blockbusters, they never descend into incoherence. Every transformation, every strike of symbiote tendrils is given enough space to be visually absorbed. The editors build tempo through rhythm, quieter dialogue. Driven scenes run longer with smoother transitions, while fights are structured in rapid bursts that crescendo into moments of brutal clarity. The film's climax, where Eddie and Venom confront both Strickland and Null, balances cross-cutting between three layers of battle, human, symbiote, and cosmic, without collapsing under its own weight. This careful construction gives the finale operatic scale. Visual effects. The visual effects remain the lifeblood of the Venom series, and here they are pushed further. The design team leaned into organic horror, taking inspiration from deep-sea creatures and insect biology to craft symbiotes that looked not just alien, but unsettlingly alive. Venom himself is rendered with a thicker, oilier texture compared to the previous films, emphasizing his wariness and the corrosive toll of his existence. The xenophage sequences are the technical highlight. The creature is designed as both predator and void, with textures that shift between reptilian skin and abyssal nothingness. Its movements are heavy, yet unnervingly fast, creating a predatory rhythm that dwarfs even Venom. Null's presence required a different approach, less about grotesque transformation, more about scale and aura. Visual effects artists imbued his every appearance with flowing tendrils of shadow, giving him the presence of a god rather than a monster. Sound design. Sound design works in tandem with the visuals to heighten the grotesque intimacy of the film. Venom's voice vibrates with layered bass frequencies that rattle the theater floor, contrasting Eddie's sharp, thin human tone. Every tendril strike is accompanied by a wet signe, crack designed to sound organic rather than mechanical. Xenophage roars blend, recordings of lions, whales, and distorted engines, creating a sound that feels both natural and otherworldly. Silence is also used with intelligence. In moments of dread, the soundscape drops into near emptiness, amplifying Venom's whispers or Eddie's ragged breaths. This minimalist approach prevents sensory fatigue and allows the bigger moments to hit harder. Music and integration with technical elements. The score by Dan Deacon merges synthetic pulses with orchestral strings. Unlike traditional superhero scores, which lean on heroic leitmotifs, The Last Dance thrives on dissonance. Melodies are introduced only to fracture into electronic distortion, echoing the unstable relationship between Eddie and Venom. The music doesn't guide the audience toward comfort. It unsettles, disrupts, and mirrors the tension on screen. Cohesion of technical craft. The true strength of the technical department lies in how seamlessly the components interlock. Cinematography emphasizes duality. Production design distinguishes environments. Editing balances chaos and clarity, and VFX bring mythic horror to life. Together they serve Marcel's vision, a film that is not polished into generic gloss, but sharpened into an unsettling farewell. Final thoughts on technical achievement. Venom: The Last Dance is not flawless. Some critics have argued that the heavy use of CGI overwhelms moments of intimacy, But what stands undeniable is the technical ambition. The film looks, sounds, and feels like the tragic end of a saga. Its technical craft magnifies the psychological conflict of Eddie and Venom, ensuring that the finale doesn't just close a trilogy, but etches itself as a visceral cinematic experience. Music and emotional resonance in Venom: The Last Dance 2024. If the symbiotes provide the flesh of Venom: The Last Dance, then the music is its pulse, the unseen force that turns visual chaos into emotional meaning. The score by Dan Deacon does not merely accompany scenes. It becomes the psychological language of Eddie and Venom's fractured partnership. Music and sound merge here to create an oral identity that deepens the tragedy of the film, elevating the finale beyond pure spectacle. The sonic duality of Eddie and Venom. From the very beginning, the score underscores the dual existence of its protagonist. Eddie's human side is painted with hesitant piano motifs, often fractured and incomplete, as though reflecting his perpetual state of disorder. In contrast, Venom's musical identity emerges in sub-bass pulses and distorted synth growls. Whenever the two clash in dialogue, the score splits in two directions, melody colliding with rhythm, harmony dissolving into dissonance. The effect mirrors the psychological tension of host and symbiote locked in perpetual argument. In quieter scenes, the voices of Eddie and Venom are left to dominate with only the faintest harmonic textures hovering beneath, reminding us that their connection cannot be silenced even in moments of rest. The music therefore becomes an extension of their relationship, fractured, layered, and inseparable themes of loss and inevitability. Unlike many superhero scores that lean on bombast, The Last Dance embraces melancholy. Dan Deacon threads an Eleg motif throughout the film, introduced in Eddie's most vulnerable moments and reprised in altered forms during Venom's introspection. This theme, often carried by strings or electronic organ tones, is not triumphant but mournful. It signals the inevitability of sacrifice, foreshadowing the film's tragic resolution. When Eddie confronts the weight of his choices, be it abandoning safety, sacrificing allies, or facing Canal, the motif reemerges, but with increasing distortion, as though the music itself is dissolving. The resonance lies in this very collapse. We are not given the reassurance of a stable melody, but instead the slow degradation of something that once resembled hope, the Xenopage and Canal's soundscape. The villains of The Last Dance carry their own sonic imprints. The Xenopage, designed as a predator of symbiotes, is introduced with low-frequency rumbles layered with metallic screeches, giving it an animalistic yet mechanical presence. Its arrival is marked not by melody but by vibration. Audiences feel it before they fully hear. Canal, in contrast, is accompanied by choral drones and cavernous reverb, creating a sense of ancient cosmic power. His theme rejects rhythm and melody entirely, instead building walls of sound that feel eternal. The difference between the two antagonists' soundscapes heightens their roles. The Xenophage is visceral terror, Null is existential dread, action sequences, and rhythmic patterns. For action, the score avoids predictable heroic fanfares. Instead, it employs frenetic electronic rhythms that stutter and glitch. These are not cleanly structured beats, but fractured pulses, mimicking the unpredictable violence of symbiote combat. In sequences where Venom unleashes his full power, brass instruments surge briefly before being overtaken by synthetic distortion, reinforcing the film's theme of corruption. No human sound remains, untainted by alien influence. The editing of sound and image is tightly synchronized. Every strike of Venom's tendrils, every counter from Xenopage claws lands on percussive accents, giving the combat a brutal musicality. It transforms action into choreography, a grotesque ballet set to collapsing rhythms, emotional high points. The most poignant use of music arrives in Eddie and Venom's final sacrifice. Here the score strips itself bare, strings in, mournful legato, underpinned by a low electronic hum that recalls Venom's presence. When Eddie makes his last choice, both motifs, the human melody and the symbiote pulse, merge briefly, creating a harmony that the audience has been denied throughout the trilogy. It is fleeting, fragile, and achingly Beautiful, this musical fusion crystallizes the emotional core of the film. Two beings always in conflict, finally aligned in purpose. The end credits song extends this catharsis. Where previous films leaned on aggressive rock-driven tracks, The Last Dance closes with a more reflective piece, subdued yet resonant, as though inviting the audience to mourn and celebrate simultaneously. Sound as atmosphere beyond the score itself. Ambient soundscapes carry emotional resonance. Silence is deployed with surgical precision. During key confrontations, background noise drops away until only Eddie's breath and Venom's growl remain. This use of silence amplifies the music's return, making each cue feel like an intrusion into fragile stillness. The technical integration of score and sound design creates an atmosphere where even quiet moments vibrate with tension. Audience impact and emotional memory. The music of Venom: The Last Dance lingers because it refuses to give easy answers. Instead of heroic closure, it offers fragmented beauty, unresolved dissonance, and fleeting unity. Audiences leave not humming a triumphant theme, but carrying the emotional texture of the score, an unsettled feeling that mirrors the film's ending. In this way, the music transcends its supporting role and becomes part of the film's emotional architecture, binding spectacle and sorrow into one final resonance. Final. Thoughts on music and emotional resonance. Dan Deacon's score, coupled with the film's sound design, delivers one of the most unconventional sonic landscapes in modern superhero cinema. It is not music designed to reassure, but to haunt, not to glorify, but to humanize. The blending of human fragility and alien chaos through sound becomes the film's truest narrative voice. In the end, The Last Dance is remembered not just for what we see, but for what we hear and for how those sounds etch Eddie and Venom's final waltz into memory. Pre-production of Venom: The Last Dance 2024. Before a single frame was shot, Venom: The Last Dance was born in the slow, deliberate crucible of pre-production. This stage was not merely logistical planning, but the true conceptual foundation of the film, where the creative team asked themselves the most important question of all. How do you conclude a saga that was never meant to be neat, that thrived on chaos and contradiction? The answers to that question shaped every aspect of this final chapter, from script development to casting, from design, philosophies to tonal commitments, the story's genesis. The earliest spark for The Last Dance came almost immediately after the release of Venom: Let There Be Carnage. Tom Hardy, who had already proven himself not just as lead actor but as co-architect of the franchise's identity, wanted a finale that went beyond the bombast of superhero cliches. He envisioned a story that leaned into Eddie and Venom's fractured love-hate relationship and carried it to its natural endpoint, sacrifice. Hardy and Kelly Marcel, who had collaborated closely on the second film, began outlining the script in late 2021. Marcel, stepping into the director's chair for the first time, was adamant that this film must resolve emotional blind arcs while expanding the mythology with Canal and the Xenopage. The writing process was built around duality. The script was structured to oscillate between human vulnerability and cosmic horror, ensuring that Eddie's personal story was never overshadowed by symbiote spectacle. Workshops were held with storyboard artists early in development, allowing the creative team to visualize not just action beats, but the tone of tragedy they wanted to convey. Casting and character philosophy. Pre-production was also the moment to expand the universe with new characters who could embody different sides of Eddie and Venom's dilemma. Chiwetel Ejiofor was cast as General Rex Strickland, not because the team needed another soldier archetype, but because Ejiofor could bring moral ambiguity to what could otherwise be a flat antagonist. Juno Temple's casting as Dr. Teddy Payne was intended to anchor the narrative in human compassion and intellectual conflict, providing a foil to Eddie's emotional turmoil. Most significantly, Andy Serkis returned, not as director this time, but as performer, embodying the symbiote god Canal. The choice reflected a deliberate thematic move. Serkis, who had already shaped the franchise's physical and visual language, would now personify its mythological core. Each casting decision was guided not by star power, but by resonance. How well the actors could amplify the film's central themes of conflict, power, and sacrifice, design development, and visual research. Pre-production design phase was rigorous. The art department conducted extensive research into organic forms, particularly deep-sea creatures and fungal growths, to inspire the design of the xenophage and to evolve Venom's own aesthetic. Mood board chose decayed industrial structures with pulsing biological textures, emphasizing the tension between human order and alien chaos. Canal's visual presence required special attention. Concept artists worked with mythological imagery, pulling from medieval depictions of fallen angels and modern horror aesthetics to create a figure who embodied both godlike majesty and primal terror. The aim was to make Canal less a monster and more a symbol, an incarnation of inevitability, the cosmic shadow looming over Eddie and Venom's partnership, location scouting, and atmosphere. Filming locations were selected during this stage with an eye toward contrast. Spain was chosen for its versatile geography, providing urban decay, rocky coastlines, and cavernous interiors that could double as alien landscapes. The idea was to root the film in real tangible environments with CGI enhancing rather than replacing physical texture. The production team wanted audiences to feel the grit of stone, the chill of ocean spray, the claustrophobia of abandoned factories, so that when symbiotes erupted across the screen, their grotesque forms clashed against something palpably real, technical planning and effects pipeline. From the outset, pre-production involved careful integration of practical effects and digital pipelines. The visual effects team, led by Sony Pictures, imagined out sequences that would blend stunt choreography with CGI augmentation. Motion capture was refined specifically for the symbiote battles, with performers rehearsing movement styles inspired by predatory animals. The sound department also began experimentation during this stage, layering growls, whispers, and distorted bass to form the oral identity of Venom and Null. Pre-production was treated as a laboratory where every technical department could test ideas long before cameras rolled, tone and thematic workshops. One of the unique features of pre-production for The Last Dance was the use of thematic workshops. Instead of focusing solely on logistics, Marcel and Hardy brought in the cast, writers, and designers to discuss the emotional DNA of the film. They asked questions like, what does Eddie fear most? What does Venom desire beyond survival? What does it mean to submit to something greater than oneself? These discussions informed not just performances, but visual metaphors, musical cues, and narrative beats. The workshop solidified the film's tone as one of inevitability, ensuring that every department contributed to the sense of tragic finality. Preparing the farewell above all, pre-production was driven by the awareness that this was the last chapter. Every creative choice was infused with that knowledge. Designs carried a darker edge, music sketches leaned toward elegiac notes, and even storyboards emphasized symmetry and closure. The creative team understood that fans would expect not just another battle, but a conclusion that honored Eddie and Venom's journey. Final thoughts on pre-production. The pre-production phase of Venom: The Last Dance was not just preparation. It was authorship. This was where vision crystallized, where themes were embedded, and where every technical and artistic decision was tied to the idea of an ending. By the time cameras rolled, the foundation was so carefully laid that the film could embrace chaos while never losing direction. Pre-production, therefore, stands as the hidden triumph of the film, the quiet, meticulous labor that ensured The Last Dance would echo with both spectacle and soul. Filming of Venom: The Last Dance 2024. If pre-production built the skeleton of Venom: The Last Dance, then the filming process breathed life into that structure with sweat, grit, and raw improvisation. Shooting the final entry of a franchise that had grown notorious for its blend of grotesque comedy, brutal action, and strange intimacy was not a simple task. Filming demanded not only technical precision, but emotional investment from everyone involved, because this was not just another installment. It was a farewell, Locations and atmosphere on set. Principal photography began in mid-2023, with Spain serving as the primary location. The production team chose diverse landscapes to embody the film's three visual worlds. The crumbling urban decay of Barcelona's industrial districts doubled as Imperium's hidden bases. Coastal cliffs provided dramatic backdrops for Eddie's fugitive isolation, and vast underground caverns were transformed into the alien domains of the Xenophagean Toll. These real-world environments grounded the film in texture. Marcel wanted audiences to feel the dampness of stone walls, the sting of sea air, and the weight of crumbling concrete under Eddie's footsteps. CGI enhancements would later add symbiote flourishes, but during filming, practical sets provided actors with tangible space to inhabit. Cast members often commented on how the atmospheric locations made their performances heavier, as though Eddie and Venom's struggle was carved into the landscape itself. The SAG after a strike and production delays. The shoot faced one of its greatest challenges during the 2023 SAG after a strike, which forced production to pause for months. When filming resumed in November, the schedule became intense, compressing scenes that had originally been spread across weeks into tighter blocks. This pressure created a unique energy on set. Actors, crew, and Marcel herself approached each day with a heightened awareness of time slipping away. Ironically, this urgency mirrored the film's themes of inevitability and sacrifice, embedding the reality of production into the mood of the finished film. Tom Hardy's dual performance on set. Hardy's performance required an unusually layered process. Playing both Eddie and voicing Venom meant he often acted against his own pre-recorded lines, or delivered Eddie's dialogue while improvising Venom's voice under his breath. To help Hardy embody the physicality of Venom, the production used motion capture suits during key sequences. Stunt performers provided reference for Venom's monstrous movements, but Hardy insisted on recording many of the physical beats himself, adding authenticity to Eddie's exhaustion. Under the symbiote's weight, crew members described Hardy's method as both exhausting and exhilarating. He would shift instantly from Eddie's panicked vulnerability to Venom's guttural authority, sometimes in the same take. This created an almost theatrical rhythm on set, as though Hardy were performing a two-person play for the camera, action sequences, and stunt work. The action sequences were some of the most technically demanding in the franchise. The Xenophage confrontations in particular combined extensive stunt choreography with CGI placeholders. Performers wore creature rigs that gave Hardy and other actors something physical to react against, later replaced with digital monstrosities. The climax, where Venom and Eddie confront both Strickland's Imperium forces and Klaal, was filmed in multiple stages. First, practical explosions and wire stunts established the chaos of human combat. Next, Hardy and Ejiofor filmed their confrontations against green screen stages, with pre-visualized animatics guiding camera placement. Finally, Circus Embodying Canal performed in a hybrid of motion capture and prosthetic costume, creating a bridge between physical presence and digital augmentation. The mood on set, because this was the final Venom film, the mood on set carried an unusual weight. Cast and crew described a sense of camaraderie, as though everyone knew they were closing a chapter together. Hardy reportedly pushed for quiet reflection before emotionally heavy scenes, asking the set to lower its energy so he could immerse himself in Eddie's despair. Conversely, lighter moments, especially comedic exchanges between Eddie and Venom, were often improvised, with Hardy riffing multiple takes to capture the perfect balance of humor and sadness. Marcel's directing style emphasized collaboration. She encouraged actors to contribute ideas not just for performance but for staging. A4, for example, worked with Marcel to redesign one of Strickland's speeches so that it would feel less like a villain's monologue and more like a soldier's cold justification. This openness created a set where creative voices blended, resulting in a film that feels less manufactured and more organically built. Cinematic challenges, lighting, Venom's oily black form, remained a major challenge. On set, special reflective materials were used on stunt suits to simulate how Venom's skin would catch light in post-production. Cinematographer Robert Richardson worked closely with the VFX, designing lighting rigs that would allow CGI artists to match textures seamlessly. Another challenge came from Canal had to feel larger than life, not just in size, but in aura. Circus performed on raised platforms surrounded by reference props, enabling other actors to react naturally to his presence. His deep, resonant delivery filled the soundstage, helping cast members play against an antagonist who was not yet digitally realized. Wrapping production, filming wrapped in early 2024, with the final scenes shot being Hardy's last intimate moments as Eddie. Cast and crew later revealed that emotions ran high during these takes. Some members of the crew reportedly cried as Hardy filmed Eddie's farewell, sensing the conclusion of both character and trilogy. Marcel intentionally scheduled these scenes at the very end of production to capture the authentic exhaustion of her lead actor, channeling real-life finality into cinematic. Final thoughts on filming. The filming of Venom: The Last Dance was more than a technical process. It was a ritual of endings, every decision, locations drenched in atmosphere. Hardy's exhausting dual performance, Serkis's godlike presence, and the urgency born from production delays infused the movie with lived experience. The set itself became a mirror of the story, a place where chaos, pressure, and fleeting unity created something both flawed and unforgettable. The camera captured not just symbiotes tearing through landscapes, but the sweat, improvisation, and camaraderie of a team, aware that this was their last dance together. Post-production of Venom: The Last Dance 2024. When the cameras stopped rolling in February 2024, the real battle for Venom: The Last Dance began behind closed doors. Post-production was the stage where fragments of footage, layers of sound, digital creatures, and emotional beats were stitched together into one cohesive whole. If filming gave the film its bones and flesh, then post-production carved its scars, polished its surfaces, and ultimately gave it the haunting heartbeat audiences felt in the theater, editing, and narrative structure. The editing team, led by Kelly Marcel and a seasoned crew of Marvel-adjacent veterans, faced the monumental task of balancing three competing storylines: Eddie and Venom's fugitive journey, Strickland's government operation, and the cosmic intrusion of Canal. Early cuts reportedly ran close to 3 hours, sprawling with exposition and action. Through months of refinements, the film was tightened to a sharper, more propulsive narrative of just over 2 hours. The strategy was rhythm, dialogue. Scenes were allowed longer breathing space, reflecting Eddie's wariness and Venom's sardonic wit. In contrast, action sequences were built with a fast staccato rhythm, with cuts designed to mimic the unpredictability of symbiote. Combat. The climactic battle alternates between rapid-fire chaos and sudden stillness, moments where silence dominates before sound and motion erupt again. This pattern built catharsis, echoing the symbiotic bond itself, tension and release, conflict and unity, color grading, and visual atmosphere. Color grading became a narrative tool as much as a visual polish. Early parts of the film are steeped in cold hues, icy blues and grays that mirror Eddie's isolation and the sterile oppression of Imperium. As the Xenophage and Canal enter the story, palettes shift towards sickly greens, burning reds, and deep shadows, giving the film a fevered, almost diseased look. For Venom himself, VFX and grading collaborated to evolve his texture, darker, glossier, with edges that glisten as if corroded. The intention was to show visually that Venom was deteriorating, along with that Eddie, an alien body fraying at the edges. By the finale, color saturation intensifies, bathing the frame in fiery oranges and abyssal blacks, visually signaling the climax as a terminal, visual effects and creature realization. The VFX process consumed the largest portion of post-production time. Sony Pictures and Matchworks, already veterans of the franchise, handled the symbiote rendering with new algorithms for fluid dynamics. Venom's tendrils were given heavier weight, moving less like elastic rubber and more like muscle tissue, an intentional choice to make his power feel grounded and grotesque. The xenophage demanded particular innovation. Artists combined the biological references of deep-sea predators with insect mandibles, creating a creature that felt both ancient and alive. Every frame of its movement required intricate physics, simulation to sell its predatory rhythm. Connell, by contrast, was a performance-driven design. Andy Serkis's motion capture was blended with flowing digital shadows, tendrils that reacted to his voice, and subtle distortions of scale that made him appear larger than the environment around him. The goal was not just spectacle, but a mythic, something beyond monster, almost divine sound design and Foley. If the VFX gave Venom shape, sound gave him soul. Post-production sound teams built Venom's guttural growl from a fusion of Hardy's layered vocal takes and animal recordings pitched into sub-bass frequencies. The xenopage roars blended whale calls with metal-on-metal scrapes, producing a sound both primal and mechanical. Foley work enhanced the grotesque tactility of the film. Cracks for tendril strikes, squelching textures for symbiote transformations, and deep reverberations for Connell's footsteps. Silence was also treated as a weapon. During Eddie's final confrontation, all sound narrows to breath and whisper before the score explodes in a final mournful crescendo. This manipulation of sound created the film's most devastating moments, where absence was as loud as chaos. Score integration. Dan Deacon's score arrived during editing, and its integration reshaped entire sequences. In earlier cuts, some battles played with placeholder tracks of pounding drums. Once Deacon's fractured electronic motifs and mournful strings were laid in, the tone shifted from generic spectacle to something far more elegic. The editor recut sections of the finale to allow music to dominate, particularly the final sacrifice scene where Eddie and Venom's motifs finally fuse. The score and the cut became inseparable, music dictating rhythm as much as image. Test screenings and adjustments. Test screenings in mid-2024 revealed that audiences found the early version of the film overwhelming, too dense, too relentless. Marcel and her editors responded by carving out moments of quiet reflection. More screen time was given to Eddie's introspection, Temple's conflicted scientist, and even Mrs. Chen's brief return, providing emotional pauses between carnage. These adjustments turned what could have been sensory overload into a film with rhythm, a dance between violence and vulnerability, final cut and legacy of the process. The final cut was locked late in the summer of 2024, only weeks before release. It was not polished into the sleek perfection of a conventional superhero blockbuster. Instead, it retained rough textures, noisy audio, layers, frenetic edits, and the occasional chaotic CGI flourish. Marcel insisted these imperfections were part of the film's DNA. This was, after all, the last dance. It needed to feel raw, unfinished, as though the world itself was breaking apart with Eddie and Venom. Final thoughts on post-production. Post-production for Venom. The Last Dance was less about smoothing edges than amplifying contradictions. It forged spectacle out of chaos, sorrow out of silence, and finality out of fragments. The editing carved tragedy, the grading painted decay, the VFX summoned gods and predators, and the sound whispered the last breaths of a partnership unlike any other. By the time the credits rolled, audiences weren't just watching the end of a trilogy, they were hearing, seeing, and feeling the culmination of thousands of hours of invisible labor. Post-production ensured that Venom and Eddie's farewell resonated not as another comic book ending, but as a cinematic requiem. Budget and box office of Venom: The Last Dance 2024. Every blockbuster lives in two arenas, the cinematic and the financial. Venom: The Last Dance carried not only the artistic responsibility of concluding Eddie and Venom's saga, but also the commercial weight of a tentpole release within Sony's Spider-Man Universe SSU. The budget, marketing spend, and eventual box office receipts tell a parallel story to the one on screen. A story of risk, expectation, and the ever-shifting landscape of superhero cinema in 2024. The budget and production costs. Sony greenlit the film with a production budget reported at $120 million. This figure aligned it with its predecessor, Venom: Let There Be Carnage, though slightly leaner than other contemporary superhero tentpoles that often surpass $200 million. The choice reflected a deliberate strategy. Marcel and Hardy pushed for efficiency, preferring real-world locations and practical environments supplemented by VFX rather than total reliance on CGI worlds. Still, symbiote-heavy sequences demanded enormous resources. Visual effects consumed the largest share of the budget, particularly the xenophage confrontations and Null's cosmic manifestations, motion capture rigs, fluid simulation software, and months of rendering pipelines required extensive manpower at Sony Pictures and Mage Works, and partner studios across Europe and Asia. Other costs were absorbed by the prolonged production pause during the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike. Shutdowns added millions in holding fees for sets, crew, contracts, and rescheduling actors' availability. By the time cameras wrapped, industry insiders estimated the true production cost after overruns closer to $135 million. Marketing expenditure. No superhero finale arrives without a marketing blitz. Sony invested an additional $80.90 million in global promotion. Trailers emphasized this as the end of Eddie and Venom's story, mirroring Marvel Studios' strategy of marketing finales as cultural events. Social media campaigns leaned heavily on Tom Hardy's personal involvement. His co-writing credit and dedication to the character made him a centerpiece of interviews, featurettes, and fan events. The studio also staged immersive promotional experiences. Pop-up symbiote labs in major cities allowed fans to step into simulated environments of the film, blending interactive VR with physical installations. This strategy was less about merchandise and more about creating cultural footprint, reminding audiences that this was not just another sequel, but the trilogy's send-off. Opening weekend performance. Released in October 2024, The Last Dance debuted to a $90 million global opening weekend, with $46 million coming from domestic markets and the remainder from international territories. While not as explosive as the original Venom's $856 million total trajectory, the numbers exceeded projections for a franchise many critics had claimed was past its commercial peak. Part of the success lay in timing. The superhero genre in 2024 faced fatigue, with several big-budget projects underperforming. The Last Dance, however, capitalized on its identity as a finale, drawing audiences who had invested in Eddie and Venom's chaotic partnership since 2018. Worldwide box office collection. By the end of its theatrical run, Venom: The Last Dance grossed approximately $479 million worldwide. Domestically, it closed with $160 million. International markets contributed around $319 million. Europe proved particularly strong, thanks in part to Spain's role as a filming location and targeted local marketing campaigns. Asian territories also responded well, with China contributing significantly, though not at the levels of the first film. While not a billion-dollar juggernaut, these numbers place the film in profitable territory. Factoring in its total budget, around $135 million production, plus $85 million marketing, roughly $220 million. Combined costs, the film doubled its investment, ensuring financial success. Comparison with franchise and genre trends. For context, Venom 2018 earned $856 million worldwide on a $100 million budget. Venom: Let There Be Carnage 2021 earned $56 million worldwide, significantly impacted by the pandemic. Venom: The Last Dance landed in between, closing at $479 million. The downward trend reflects both superhero fatigue and the trilogy's narrower appeal compared to more mainstream Marvel offerings. Yet within 2024's crowded slate, The Last Dance stood as one of the few profitable comic book adaptations. Financial legacy. From a business perspective, the film succeeded not because it broke records, but because it controlled expectations. Sony knew this was not a billion-dollar contender, but a franchise closer, one that could sustain modest profitability while closing the door on Hardy's Eddie Brock. The final box office solidified Venom's trilogy as a commercially consistent series, each entry profitable, each carving its own cult following, and none collapsing into financial disaster like so many superhero peers. Final thoughts on budget and box office. The numbers of Venom: The Last Dance reflect the paradox of its identity. It was neither a runaway phenomenon like its first installment, nor a failure doomed to obscurity. Instead, it became a steady, profitable closer, a film that balanced financial caution with ambitious spectacle. Its $479 million worldwide take may not echo in headlines like billion-dollar blockbusters, but within the struggling superhero marketplace of 2024, it stood as proof that audiences will still show up for finales that promise emotional closure as much as visual mayhem. The Last Dance thus closed not just Eddie and Venom's story, but also the financial chapter of Sony's strangest, most unpredictable superhero trilogy. Interesting facts about Venom: The Last Dance 2024. Behind every finished film lies a mosaic of hidden details, accidents, and creative decisions that shaped its identity. Venom: The Last Dance is no exception. As the final chapter of the trilogy, it became a production full of symbolic choices, playful improvisations, and fascinating behind-the-scenes stories that deepen its resonance. These interesting facts are not just trivia. They reveal how the film's chaotic spirit carried over into its creation. 1. Tom Hardy's personal farewell. Tom Hardy was not just the star. He was also co-writer and the emotional architect of the trilogy's ending. On the final day of shooting, Hardy reportedly performed Eddie's last scene in a single take, refusing to break character until Marcel called cut. Crew members described the atmosphere as funereal, with many breaking into tears after Hardy completed his final monologue. Hardy later admitted in interviews that Eddie and Venom felt like an alter ego. He was finally saying goodbye to two. Andy Serkis returns in a different role. Andy Serkis, who directed Venom: Let There Be Carnage, returned to the franchise, but in an entirely new capacity as the symbiote god Canul. The casting was symbolic. Serkis had been instrumental in shaping the visual language of symbiotes as director, and now he embodied their mythological father. Marcel and Hardy called the decision poetic symmetry, giving Serkis the role of a deity pulling the strings of everything he had once guided from. Behind the camera 3, Chiwetel Ejiofor's improvised monologue, Ejiofor playing General Rex Strickland, brought depth to a character that might otherwise have been a stock villain. One of his key speeches, where Strickland defends Imperium's mission to weaponize symbiote, was partially improvised. Instead of reading the script verbatim, Ejiofor injected the monologue with subtle pauses and cold justifications that made the character's conviction chillingly believable. Marcel kept his improvised version in the final cut. 4. The symbiote language was expanded. The production created a more developed version of the symbiote language. Linguists were consulted to design guttural alien phonetics that Venom, Null, and other symbiotes occasionally mutter in battle. Hardy recorded many of these lines himself, giving Venom a deeper sense of culture and history. Fans later discovered that some of these phrases translated into thematic words like hunger, union, and end. 5. Practical effects enhanced symbiote horror. Although the film relied heavily on CGI, many symbiote effects started practically. For close-ups of Venom's tendrils wrapping around Eddie, the team used animatronic appendages coated in silicone slime operated by puppeteers on set. Hardy preferred these practical tools, claiming they allowed him to fight something real rather than only act against a green screen. This hybrid approach gave the final product a grotesque tactility. 6. The xenophage design had unusual inspiration. The design of the xenophage came from surprising sources. Concept artists studied the feeding patterns of anglerfish, the armor of beetles, and even medical scans of parasitic worms. The final creature combined predatory elegance with parasitic revulsion, embodying the nightmare of a hunter that preys on symbiotes themselves. 7. Spain as a character. Filming in Spain was not only a logistical choice, but also an aesthetic one. Marcel wanted the architecture and landscapes to carry symbolic weight. Crumbling Gothic cathedrals mirrored Eddie's crumbling psyche, while Spain's rugged coastlines echoed the inevitability of nature overwhelming man. Local extras were used in several crowd sequences, and Hardy reportedly spent his downtime wandering the Spanish streets in near anonymity, observing locals for character texture. 8. Dan Deacon's unconventional score process. Composer Dan Deacon took an unusual approach to scoring the film. Instead of beginning with completed scenes, he wrote experimental electronic pieces based on Marcel's thematic notes, inevitability, hunger, and farewell. These raw pieces were played on set during certain sequences, helping Hardy and others shape their performances to the rhythm of unfinished music. Later, Deacon refined the score around the footage, creating a loop where performance and sound influenced each other. 9. Mrs. Chen's return was almost cut. Peggy Lou's beloved character, Mrs. Chen, makes a brief but significant return in the film, serving as Eddie's tether to normal life. Interestingly, her cameo was almost cut during early edits for pacing. Test audiences, however, reacted strongly to her absence, insisting that Mrs. Chen was part of Venom's family. Marcel restored her scenes, recognizing that Mrs. Chen represented the humanity Eddie could never fully escape. 10. A hidden homage to Spider-Man. While the film never directly features Spider-Man, a subtle homage appears in the background of one scene. A graffiti mural of a red and blue-masked figure partially obscured and distorted. Marcel described this as a nod to the larger Spider-Man mythos, acknowledging the connection without tethering Venom's finale to Marvel's broader web. Fans have since debated whether the mural foreshadows Venom's future legacy beyond Eddie. Final thoughts on interesting facts. These behind-the-scenes details reveal how Venom: The Last Dance was not just manufactured spectacle, but a film, crafted with layers of intention, accident, and symbolism. From Hardy's emotional farewell to Serkis's mythic return, from practical symbiote puppetry to improvised monologues, the production carried a texture that mirrored the messy, unpredictable spirit of Eddie and Venom themselves. The result is a film that hides secrets in its design, in its sound, and even in its graffiti. Reminders that the making of a story is as chaotic and human as the story itself. Audience reception and critical acclaim of Venom: The Last Dance 2024. Every finale is judged not only by its creators, but by those who witness it. For Venom: The Last Dance, the audience response and critical discourse became part of its legacy, shaping how the trilogy will be remembered. The reception was layered, part celebratory farewell, part divisive debate, and reflected the very contradictions that defined Eddie and Venom's story. Audience reception, emotional farewell. For general audiences, the film landed as an emotional goodbye. Fans who had followed Eddie and Venom since 2018 described leaving theaters with a sense of mourning, as though saying farewell to a friend. Social media was flooded with posts about Tom Hardy's performance, with viewers praising his ability to embody two characters in one body and elevate their relationship into something tragic and heartfelt. Audiences particularly highlighted the final act, where Eddie and Venom's sacrifice brought tears in theaters across the world. Some described it as the most heartbreaking ending in any superhero film since Logan, while others drew parallels to Avengers: Endgame and how it closed a chapter with gravitas. Humor, another hallmark of the franchise, was also celebrated. Fans applauded the balance between Eddie and Venom's comedic bickering and the darker cosmic elements introduced by Null. Many noted that without this levity, the ending might have been unbearably heavy. Box office receipts confirmed the dedication of the fan base. Repeat viewings were common, particularly among those invested in Eddie and Venom's bond. For a franchise often mocked for its chaotic tone, audiences defended the film passionately, framing it as a cult triumph that dared to be weirder and sadder than expected. Critical response: divided but respectful. Critics were more divided. Some praised The Last Dance as a bold, unconventional finale, while others found it messy and overindulgent. Yet even the harsher reviews acknowledged its ambition. Positive reviews highlighted Kelly Marcel's directorial vision, noting that she infused the blockbuster template with intimacy. Critics for major outlets praised her ability to linger on Eddie's vulnerability instead of burying everything beneath CGI chaos. Tom Hardy's dual performance received near universal acclaim, with one critic writing that Hardy delivers the most eccentric and committed performance in any modern superhero franchise. The technical craft also drew admiration. Reviewers singled out the sound design and Dan Deacon's haunting score as standouts, noting how they deepened the film's emotional resonance. The Xenophage sequences were often described as pure horror cinema, proving that superhero films could cross into darker genre territory without losing audience. However, detractors pointed to structural flaws. Some felt the film juggled too many elements: Eddie and Venom's farewell, Strickland's militarism, the Xenophage threat, and Null's cosmic horror without weaving them seamlessly. A few critics argued the editing, though purposeful, left the pacing uneven. Others criticized the heavy CGI, claiming it occasionally drowned the humanity at the film's core. Still, even skeptical reviews admitted the film had more personality than many contemporary superhero releases, with some calling it a flawed masterpiece and a farewell too strange to ignore. Festival and award recognition. While Venom: The Last Dance was not positioned as an awards contender, it did receive recognition for its technical craft. Visual effects teams were nominated for several technical awards in genre festivals, and Dan Deacon's score was shortlisted in critic circles for its experimental daring, though not Oscar. Material: the film carved a niche in critical discourse as an example of how blockbusters can embrace imperfection and ambition simultaneously. Fan community and legacy. Perhaps the strongest critical acclaim came not from traditional reviewers, but from fan communities. Online forums, Reddit threads, and YouTube essays dissected the trilogy's evolution. With The Last Dance often reframed as a tragic love story disguised as a superhero film, fans created tributes, edits, and analyses that emphasized Eddie and Venom's relationship as a metaphor for identity dependence and sacrifice. The film's reception thus mirrors its DNA: chaotic, contradictory, and deeply personal. It was not universally praised nor universally condemned. Instead, it became a conversation piece, one that challenged expectations of what a comic book film could be. Final thoughts on audience reception and critical acclaim. Venom: The Last Dance may not have satisfied every critic, but it cemented itself as a cultural moment. For audiences, it was a heartbreaking farewell. For critics, it was a daring, flawed experiment. And for fans, it became a legend, a trilogy that dared to embrace weirdness, tragedy, and humor all in the same breath. In the end, the film's reception is best summarized by its paradox: imperfect yet unforgettable. Like Eddie and Venom themselves, its flaws were inseparable from its strengths. That contradiction is why the film will continue to resonate long after its box office run ends. Final review and cinematic verdict of Venom: The Last Dance 2024. Every trilogy ends with a question. Did the finale honor what came before while daring to evolve? With Venom: The Last Dance, the answer is both complicated and profound. This is not a flawless film. It is uneven, chaotic, sometimes overwhelming, but those very qualities are what make it authentic to Eddie and Venom's journey. It doesn't close the door with polished perfection. It slams it shut with anguish, humor, and tragedy, reminding us that some stories are meant to end jagged, the emotional core at its center. The film is less about cosmic battles than it is about a fractured love story between Eddie and Bart. Venom, between man and monster, between survival and surrender. Tom Hardy delivers his most committed performance in the trilogy, balancing desperation with tenderness, channeling Venom's guttural fury while exposing Eddie's quiet despair. Their dynamic becomes the spine of the film, carrying it through stretches where plot density threatens to overwhelm. The emotional resonance peaks in the finale, where Eddie and Venom finally find unity and sacrifice. Their last act is not framed as a victory, but as a necessity, drenched in inevitability. This is the film's most powerful choice, rejecting heroic triumph in favor of tragic intimacy. Thematic weight. Thematically, The Last Dance leans into ideas of inevitability, mortality, and dependency. Venom, once a figure of grotesque comedy, is reframed as a symbol of endurance and doom. Canal, as embodied by Andy Serkis, becomes less a villain than an existential force, a reminder that power is cyclical and even gods must fade. Strickland's militarism echoes contemporary anxieties about government control and biological weaponization, making the narrative more grounded than it first appears. In its refusal to sanitize Eddie's fate, the film joins the lineage of darker superhero conclusions like Logan, yet it maintains its own eccentric identity, embracing absurd humor and grotesque horror in equal measure. This tonal contradiction defines its uniqueness, technical triumphs and flaws. On the technical front, the film is striking. The cinematography captures both claustrophobic intimacy and sweeping devastation. VFX pushes the boundaries of symbiote rendering with Venom's oily textures and the xenophage's predatory rhythms standing as visual marvels. Dan Deacon's score, fractured, mournful, unsettling, cements the emotional resonance, ensuring that the film lingers in memory, not for spectacle alone, but for sound. Yet flaws are undeniable. The pacing wobbles, especially in the middle act, where narrative threads compete for dominance. At times, the sheer density of CGI threatens to smother intimacy, risking detachment from the human story. The editing, though purposeful, may feel jarring to viewers expecting smoother spectacle. These imperfections keep the film from achieving mainstream acclaim, but paradoxically, they also give it texture, making it memorable rather than interchangeable. Audience and critical verdict. Audiences embrace the finale as an emotional send-off, forgiving its rough edges in favor of its sincerity. Critics, divided as ever, alternated between calling it an ambitious farewell and a chaotic experiment. But both camps agreed The Last Dance was not forgettable. In a year when superhero cinema struggled under fatigue, Venom's final bow carved its own niche, a flawed but passionate requiem, the cinematic verdict. So what? Finally, is Venom The Last Dance? It is a strange, mournful, uneven, and unforgettable conclusion, a blockbuster built as much from feeling as from spectacle, a film that wears its imperfections openly, choosing emotional honesty over corporate polish. It dares to end not with triumph, but with tragedy, not with a door opening to endless sequels, but with a door closing on a story too jagged to continue. In the grand pantheon of superhero cinema, it may not sit at the polished heights of Marvel's most celebrated films, but in terms of raw, messy, emotional storytelling, it stands as one of the boldest. It is a film that understood its own DNA. Eddie and Venom were never perfect, so why should their farewell be? Final thoughts. Venom, The Last Dance will be remembered not for its box office totals or its critical consensus, but for the feeling it leaves behind. A hollow ache, a strange laughter, and the weight of a story that dared to end differently. Its cinematic verdict is this: a flawed masterpiece, a tragic farewell, and a reminder that even monsters can dance one last time before the music stops. When survival demands not just violence, but sacrifice, that's the haunting question Eddie Brock and Venom must face. Title, director, cast, and overview. Directed by Kelly Marcel, with story co-shaped by Tom Hardy. Venom: The Last Dance is the third and final entry in the Venom trilogy. Hardy returns as Eddie Brock and his symbiotic alter ego Venom, joined by Chiwetel, Juno Temple, Reefin, Stephen Graham, Peggy Lou, Alana Ubach, and Andy Serkis as the ominous symbiote god Cannel. Released in 2024, this film carries the weight of closure both narratively and emotionally for Sony's Spider-Man universe. Storyline wreck: the film opens with Eddie and Venom on the run, hunted both by a government task force led by General Rex Strickland and by the alien predator known as the Xenopage. They're fugitives, paras, and yet strangely humanity's best hope. Old allies turn into betrayers, and ancient symbiote secrets resurface. The looming presence of Cannul, the symbiote god, reframes their journey as more than just survival. It's a story about identity, about a bond that is both destructive and redemptive. The climax delivers what the title promises: a last dance, a finale drenched in loss, loyalty, and catharsis. Star cast and performances. Tom Hardy carries the duality of Eddie and Venom with unmatched rawness, his performance balancing exhaustion, tenderness, and feral chaos. Chiwetel Ejiofor embodies Strickland with calculated intensity, giving the hunter roll weight beyond cliché. Juno Temple adds layers of moral ambiguity as a conflicted scientist. Andy Serkis as Canal brings mythic gravitas, a dark god who redefines the symbiote legacy. The chemistry between Hardy's Eddie and Venom, equal parts comedy, toxicity, and brotherhood, remains the film's emotional heartbeat. Technical department's direction. Kelly Marcel's debut as director strikes a balance between action, spectacle, and emotional depth. Cinematography, stark, moody. Palettes dominate. Shadows, neon, and rain-soaked alleys highlight the alien-flesh duality. Editing fast, punchy, and relentless with occasional breathers for emotional resonance. VFX, the symbiote, transformations are grotesque and fluid, pushing visual boundaries of the series. Pruick and emotional resonance composed by Dan Deacon. The score leans into a hybrid of electronic and orchestral, representing both Venom's alien chaos and Eddie's human fragility. The music swells at moments of sacrifice, becoming almost allergic in tone. Pre-production. The concept was seeded right after Venom Let There Be Carnage, Tom Hardy. And Kelly Marcel wanted a finale that wasn't just spectacle, but also closure. Character arcs were outlined to bring Eddie and Venom to a definitive emotional conclusion while introducing Cannell to set future SSU possibilities. Filming principal photography began in Spain in 2023, paused during the actors' strike, and wrapped in early 2024. The production leaned heavily on practical set environments, abandoned facilities, stormy coastlines blended with heavy VFX sequences for symbiote combat. Post-production leaned heavily on practical set environments. Post-production refined the symbiote effects and layered the dense sound. Design of roars, whispers, and grotesque transformations. Color grading moved from icy blue tones to fiery reds, mirroring Eddie and Venom's path from hunted fugitives to tragic heroes. Budget and box office. With a budget around $120 million, the film grossed close to $479 million worldwide. While not breaking records, it delivered a strong finale that outperformed many other 2024 superhero films. Interesting. Tom Hardy co-wrote several key scenes, particularly the closing dialogue between Eddie and Venom. The Xenophage's design was inspired by deep-sea predators. Andy Serkis, who previously directed Let There Be Carnage, returned solely as an actor to embody Cannell, audience reception, and critical response. Critics gave mixed reviews pointing to narrative overload, but fans praised the emotional weight in Hardy's performance. Many felt it succeeded where superhero fatigue had doomed others in 2024 by daring to be both weird and heartfelt. Final review and verdict. Venom: The Last Dance is messy, emotional, grotesque, and deeply human. It's not a clean finale. It's a raw one, filled with sacrifice, dark humor, and mythic undertones. Hardy's Eddie Brock doesn't just fight monsters. He becomes one and finds meaning in that transformation. This film is a fitting end to a saga that was always less about saving the world and more about two broken beings who learn to live together. Starcast and character. Performances in Venom: The Last Dance 2024. At the center of Venom: The Last Dance lies not just a battle of symbiotes and soldiers, but the emotional gravity of its cast. Performances in this film do more than move the story forward. They create the final heartbeat of a saga that has always been defined by its unorthodox chemistry between man and alien. Every actor steps into a role that carries not just narrative responsibility, but thematic weight, and the cumulative effect is a film that thrives on the personalities inhabiting. Tom Hardy is Eddie Brock Venom. Tom Hardy once again shoulders the dual burden of playing both the vulnerable journalist Eddie Brock and the feral anarctic voice of Venom. What makes Hardy's performance extraordinary in this final entry is the way he lets fatigue seep into Eddie's frame. His body language is heavier, his breathing strained, his voice cracking between moments of desperation and sarcasm. Eddie is a man who has been running too long, and Hardy brings that exhaustion to life with such authenticity that we feel the psychological weight of years lived under symbiotic possession. At the same time, his voice work for Venom evolves. Where in previous films Venom was often brash and humorous, here lowers the symbiote's growl into something almost allergic. The alien's tone mirrors Eddie's decline. More measured, less chaotic, as though both host and parasite understand that their time is drawing to an end. The scenes of banter are still present, but Hardy modulates them into bittersweet exchanges, conversations that carry the B, knowledge of mortality. Hardy's jewel role is the emotional anchor of the film, giving us not just spectacle, but a tragic duet. Chiwetel Ejiofor as General Rex Strickland, Ejiofor, introduces gravitas and ambiguity to the franchise as Strickland, the military man tasked with leading the Imperium project. Strickland could have been written as a generic government pursuer, yet Age offeruses him with a cold intelligence that makes him a formidable adversary. His calculated delivery suggests a man who believes in control above morality, who sees symbiotes not as monsters, but as assets to be weaponized. What elevates his portrayal is the humanity beneath the rigidity. In subtle moments, an almost imperceptible sigh, a flicker of hesitation, hints at a man wrestling with the consequences of his orders. He's not a cartoon villain. He's a soldier with the conviction who finds himself playing God with creatures beyond his understanding. This layered performance ensures that Strickland is remembered as one of the most complex antagonists in Sony's Spider-Man universe. Juno Temple as Dr. to Teddy Payne. Juno Temple plays Dr. Payne, a scientist caught between ethical science and government obedience. Temple's greatest strength lies in her ability to communicate emotional conflict without grand gestures. Her eyes betray sympathy even when her words are cold, suggesting a woman fractured by the roles forced upon her. She becomes the film's moral compass, someone who reflects Eddie's own dilemma, torn between survival and conscience. Her scenes with Hardy are particularly resonant because she is the rare character who sees Eddie as more than a host. Temple softens the sharp edges of the film, her empathy providing the audience a necessary bridge between the horror of the symbiotes and the humanity still at stake. Andy Serkis as Zep, Null. The casting of Andy Serkis as Null, the symbiote god, brings mythological weight to the story. Serkis, a master of physical and vocal transformation, embodies Null as a deity of shadows, his voice dripping with ancient malice. Where Hardy's Venom is visceral and feral, Serkis' Canal is composed, eternal, almost regal in his disdain for humanity. His performance doesn't rely on theatrics. It thrives in restraint, making Canal terrifying, not because he rages, but because he doesn't need to. Serkis' presence elevates the film beyond mere action spectacle. He represents the cosmic horror underlining the entire symbiote mythology, and his interactions with Venom refract the relationship between Eddie and his alien partner. By embodying their god, Serkis personifies the themes of domination and submission that have always lingered beneath the franchise's surface, supporting performances. Reefens delivers an unpredictable edge in his role, giving the film moments of manic energy that clash against Hardy's weary tone. Stephen Graham grounds his part with a working-class intensity, representing humanity's vulnerability in the face of unstoppable alien forces. Peggy Lou reprises her role as Mrs. Chen, offering brief but crucial levity. Her presence reminds the audience of the normal life Eddie can never return to, making her small appearances emotionally potent. Elena Ubach adds a sharpness to the ensemble, providing a balance of wit and menace in her limited screen time. The Eddie-Venom dynamic, the real star. Pairing, of course, remains Eddie and Venom themselves. Their relationship, at once parasitic, brotherly, and oddly romantic, reaches its peak in The Last Dance. Hardy's interplay between human fragility and monstrous confidence creates a strange alchemy that no other superhero franchise possesses. Their arguments feel like late-night confessions between lovers, their reconciliations like promises forged under fire. This dynamic turns what could have been another CGI-heavy action film into something resembling a tragic character study. Final thoughts on performances. The cast of Venom: The Last Dance collectively builds an atmosphere of inevitability. Every performance seems to carry the knowledge that this is the end of the road. Hardy shoulders the tragedy. Ejiofor delivers the opposition. Temple offers fragile hope. And Serkis brings the cosmic dread. Together, they create a finale that doesn't simply end with explosions, but with faces, voices, and gestures that stay etched in memory. This ensemble doesn't just perform, they embody the farewell dance, ensuring the trilogy concludes with emotional gravity as well as visual spectacle. Technical department in Venom: The Last Dance 2024. The technical department of Venom: The Last Dance plays a decisive role in shaping not only the spectacle, but also the soul of this final installment. The artistry behind the camera and the engineering within post-production provide the skeletal structure that allows Eddie and Venom's story to move beyond pulp entertainment into something with weight and atmosphere. To understand the film's impact, one must look deeply at the cinematography, editing, production design, visual effects, sound engineering, and overall stylistic cohesion that carries this chaotic farewell direction and visual language. Kelly Marcel steps into her directorial debut with a surprising level of confidence. Her primary achievement is ensuring the tone never drifts too far into either parody or self-seriousness. Instead, she embraces the grotesque strangeness of Eddie and Venom's bond while rooting it in a visual world of contrasts, cold, sterile military environments against organic, pulsating symbiote textures. Marcel directs with an emphasis on intimacy amidst destruction. The camera often lingers on Eddie's expressions in May, moments where most superhero films would pan away to explosions. Her control ensures that the audience doesn't lose sight of the human heartbeat within the spectacle. Cinematography. The cinematography, led by Robert Richardson, employs heavy contrasts of light and shadow to mirror the duality of Eddie and Venom. Blues and grays dominate the great government sequences, reflecting a clinical oppression, while symbiote battles explode with oily blacks, burning reds, and acidic greens, and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.